When I think about productivity increases, and whether we're talking about full automation or just something helping me with my job like ChatGPT or Copilot, I can't help but think about the economic impact of this. So we know that so much of economics can be reduced to just simple supply and demand, and we know that productivity sits quite squarely on the supply side of things. So the more productive I am, the more I can build, the more I can make, and therefore the more I can sell. So I'm always very interested to think about, if I'm more productive, if I'm doing more for my company, am I going to get paid more for that work? And that's why I was quite interested to see PWC's latest AI Barometer report, which came out quite rosy, to be honest. They had quite a positive sentiment into all of these kind of things. So I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at what they were saying, and let's see if the historical precedent really aligns with that feeling. And I'll put a link to it in the description, but the PWC Barometer report basically had 4 key findings, which I'll put on the screen. 2 of which are not too surprising, 2 of which make for interesting conversation. So the 2 that aren't surprising is that jobs requiring AI specialist skills, and I'll put a little thing on the screen showing you what they classify as AI specialist skills. So this is not things like, can you use ChatGPT? But anyway, so jobs that require those kind of skills are taking on a 25% premium in terms of wages, which is quite significant, as well as quite a hefty jump in job postings. So again, this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise for anyone. The fact that people are making money by selling shovels in a gold rush is not a new concept. So so it's not too much of a surprise. But what was quite interesting is the increase in productivity. So we've got a 5x increase over the norm. So again, that's not an increase on a job basis of 5x, but rather the rate of productivity growth. So in normal non-exposed or non-AI exposed industries, you're looking at about 0.9% productivity increase, whereas in these AI exposed industries, you're looking at up to 5x of that, as well as a 25% shift in skills required for the jobs. Now, I could talk on each of these points for quite a while, but I don't want this video to be 50 hours long, so I'm just going to focus on the productivity side for now. So the interesting thing for me was, as you can see in the key findings, that this could lead to an increase in wages. Now, PwC did try and temper their wording on this, so they did try and say this can or could, but I would say that the overall sentiment of the paper would definitely be considered positive in my book, at least. And I found that interesting because, when we go back into the historical data, when we say that it can increase wages, yeah, sure it can, but it would also be equally fair to say, but it can also cause wage stagnation, because more often than not, what we've seen is that is actually what happens. And yeah, let's have a look at 2 charts that kind of say the same thing. The first one is from the Fed, and we can see that this chart is looking at basically the correlation between productivity increases and wage growth. And we can see up until the late 70s, early 80s, there was quite a strong correlation. So productivity went up and wage growth went up with that. But we can see after the early 80s, there was a very strong decoupling that continues to this day. So that's already casting some pretty serious doubts on the PwC statement that increased productivity could lead to wage growth, because the Fed kind of says otherwise. If I pull up another report from the EPI, you would see that this is saying kind of the same thing, really. So we can see a strong decoupling, and their claim for this as to why this occurred is a combination of changes to legislation as well as loss of power for the unions. And this has kind of led to a lack of job protection, automation coming in, taking away a lot of jobs, and replacement jobs not popping up in time, which is one of my bigger concerns when it comes to this kind of productivity. I'll stop here for a second with a nice background view of the lake. So the thing that gets me quite nervous about talking about productivity increases and wage growth is that it's all very linked to the central idea that increased productivity is good for the economy, raises GDP, as the definition of productivity is, and that growth in the GDP is basically a rising tide lifting all ships scenario. And very often when you look at the data, this is true, right? So we do find productivity can lead to job losses. I'll talk more about that in a second. But we do also find that the wider economy grows, so people who lose a job in one sector or one area tend to move into another area and take up a job there, which is fine, okay? But the problem with that kind of equation is that it is highly dependent on the sector, the skill set, and even the geography. So we can see situations like in the States when we had the automation boom in the manufacturing industry, that the people who used to work in those factories or those manufacturing plants lost their jobs, never got them back, had to completely reskill, if they could reskill at all, and move somewhere else, right, and do something else. And a lot of economists just chalk this up as a given, right? So I don't know if they consider this to be collateral damage in the industry, but this is just the cost of growth, and people will, on aggregate, be better off, right? On aggregate, people will find a new job and they'll move on. But the problem there is that this requires that to happen in the first place, right? That more jobs actually do occur. But it becomes problematic because the pace of change and the pace of growth is really what's going to dictate whether this is a success or not, okay? So if we think about things like the Industrial Revolution, even the introduction of internet and things like that, we can see that at times it can take decades, right, for these economic benefits to actually manifest itself within the economy. And in that time, between you losing your job and the economic benefits kicking in, it's a really, really difficult time for anyone affected by this. And if we think about the sheer breadth of the jobs that are currently at risk of or exposed to AI technology, that becomes really concerning, right? So it's not just a single industry. We're talking about everything from medical care all the way through to lawyers, all the way through to clerical work, and everything in between is currently on what we refer to as AI exposure, right? So I'd recommend checking out the papers of Wiley and Brian Jolfson. I'll put some links in the description to that. I'll do a video of that in the future, so give us a subscribe if you want to check that out in the future. And basically we now know what types of tasks and therefore what type of occupations are most at risk. And according to Royal Society, we're looking at something like 47% of job tasks within the UK are suitable for automation, right? So that's a lot. Okay, so we're talking about a lot of job displacement across a very wide, both geographical and occupational variety, right? And that is going to put a huge amount of pressure on the economy to grow and subsequently take these people in. And if the economy doesn't grow fast enough, then you're going to have an oversupply of labor, which is going to drive labor prices down and increase job losses, right? So PwC's statement that this can lead to wage growth is absolutely true, because more productive people can drive down the prices of the products they're producing, can use that extra money saved in productivity by the firm to reinvest into infrastructure and research and things like that. So yes, PwC is correct that you can have an increase in wages, but you gotta caveat that with a very strong possibility that the complete opposite would happen. And that's something that I think we as a society need to be talking a lot more about, right? We should be having these conversations with our colleagues, with our family, with our employers, with our members of Congress, everything really, because at the end of the day, this is going to be something that very soon is going to start affecting a lot of people, and it already is. Okay, so going back to PWC's own paper, they're talking about a 25% change in skills required for a job. Okay, reskilling is the canary in the coal mine of job losses and job changes, right? So if you no longer need a set of skills, and that is the only set of skills you have, that is a job loss. Okay, and that is a need to reskill, and reskilling is a privilege that not everybody has. Okay, the fact that AI specialist skills are now commanding higher wage premiums, more job postings, is only really contributing to that argument. And the inequality aspects of this is a massive part of this conversation we need to be having. I'm not going to have that conversation today. I think I can do plenty of videos of that in the future, but suffice it to say for now that productivity increases is not necessarily going to lead to more wages, and again, Fed data suggests the opposite would happen. And also, we need to be very aware of which skills and which activities we're doing in our jobs that are actually at risk of productivity increases, because where there's a productivity increase as a result of AI is also a pretty good candidate for AI to replace that, or technology in general to replace that. So be careful what you wish for in terms of productivity increases. And I'm going to leave it there for this one. If you enjoyed the video, if you want to engage with me on new conversations about AI and technology disruptions, please feel free to give a subscribe, leave a comment in the description if you think, or down in the comments if you think I'm wrong and you want to call me out on anything. I want to be wrong, I want to learn, so please feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll chat with you down in the comments. Until next time, see you around.